All right, thanks for joining us today. Today we're going to share our story of NutraDrip, how we got started, what's behind our business, and how we got started in all of this. So with me today here, I've got my brother Ted Grimm. We're partners here at NutraDrip. We've been together since we started this thing and have some history together, some history to share, and a little bit about where we're at today and where we're going as a company and looking ahead as well. So every company's got a story, and we'll start with ours. I'll go ahead and get started and then let Ted throw some of his memories in. So like I said, my name is Kurt Grimm. Have my wife Hannah and our children. We have 8 children. Oldest is married. Live here in northeast Kansas on the family farm. I grew up on a farm. Actually grew up on a dairy farm until I was 5 years old, and then we moved off the dairy farm. Started a new operation. And just did crop farming, raised hogs, was in FFA, did livestock for my SAE project, mainly fattening out hogs, did some sheep. We fattened cattle, had a couple hundred head feed lot as well growing up. Over time, that kind of evolved, and Dad was an idea person. He still is an idea person. He's always got a new idea. And he got into the greenhouse industry. He was looking at different things of ways to keep his boys on the farm. There's 5 of us boys in the family. Dad did a really good job of that, though. All 5 of us boys are involved in some part of agriculture that he was involved with. So just give you our family layout as far as our siblings go. So I have my oldest sister, Christy, is married, lives in Minnesota. She's married to a dairyman up there. And then I'm second, and then my sister, Gwen, lives up near Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Her husband's an electrical engineer. And then it's myself, I'm between Gwen and Christy. And then Keith is after Gwen. And Keith is a partner on our farming operation. That's called Precision Farms. And then he also has a center pivot business called MWI over in Hiawatha, Kansas. Covers northeast Kansas, southeast Nebraska, and into Missouri and Iowa. So we work together, always have worked together. When it first started, we'll get in a little bit more about that, how that partnership started. When NutraDrip was first formed. And then my brother Galen is our farm manager. Then Ted is after Galen, and then Glenn's the youngest. And Glenn is on the farm with Galen as well. So Precision Farms is Galen and Glenn. They operate it. Keith and I are silent partners on that. And then Ted and I are partners in NutraDrip. And actually Grimm's Gardens, which we'll hear a little bit more about that story in a little bit, is the parent company of NutraDrip. That's our legal entity. We have a landscape company and garden center. So Dad started the garden center, actually started with greenhouses back in the early 90s. Started with 3 acres of U-pick blueberries. We raised strawberries for a while. When he got into the blueberries, he built the first greenhouse to propagate those blueberries. And so we have a 30 by 90 greenhouse that was set up for propagating blueberries, and then transplanted those out into the field. And then from there we did some hydroponic strawberries, and then got into hydroponic tomatoes, and then eventually expanded the hydroponic tomatoes and built 2 additional greenhouses for that. And then over time, Mom was a plant lover, still is. She's a fantastic flower. She has a green thumb, so she can raise about anything. Always had a big garden growing up. And she got into flowers, and people would come out and put flower beds. So Mama's has a green thumb. Always had a big garden growing up, and so those greenhouses eventually slowly started turning into flowers. And over time, eventually, we completely took over all the hydroponic tomatoes, and now those greenhouses get filled up with flowers every spring, and we have a full offering of annuals, perennials, trees, shrubs, fruit trees. We have a landscape division. We have 2 landscape designers. We have a mowing crew, does lawn mowing, lawn maintenance. So we do fertilizing of lawns. We have a tree trimming crew. We have a couple arborists, certified arborists on our team. So just kind of a well-rounded garden center landscape company. Ted, maybe fill in some of your memories from that time period of some of the ideas that Dad had and how things started.
Yeah, so like Kurt said, I'm a partner in business with him. Got a wife, Miranda, and we have 4 kids together. So stay busy with family as well when I'm not at work. So some of my earliest memories kind of go back to with the greenhouses would be the hydroponic tomatoes. Spent a lot of time picking tomatoes, picking blooms off of tomatoes, washing tomatoes. Spent a lot of time as a kid growing up in the greenhouse, helping do that. Also, to help take care of the livestock, milk cows, feed cattle. So
We had a milk goat.
couple milk cows before the milk goats. At 6 years old, I started milking a cow by hand, and that was kind of my job till I was about 12 when my younger brother Glenn was old enough to start doing it. So yeah, just helped with a lot with the chores there, and then yeah, as time transitioned around 2022, we started doing landscaping, and so 2002, yeah, sorry. Started doing landscaping, and I was the main wheelbarrow operator, I think. So
Back in the day. There's not too many wheelbarrows on the crew anymore. Now it's all mini skid steers, but
they don't know how good they got it.
they do, that's for sure. So the greenhouse business, and one of the reasons I always bring up the hydroponic tomatoes is because as my part of that operation was it wasn't so much the picking and the blooms and things like that. I was more in charge of the fertigation, keeping the plants healthy, bugs, chemicals. We tried to be pesticide free. It was a real challenge in the greenhouse. You get whitefly outbreaks. We used beneficial bugs, try to keep the whiteflies under control. We'd have aphid outbreaks at different times. So the hydroponic tomatoes was a challenge, a significant challenge. It's not an easy business in northeast Kansas. There's a reason that most of those greenhouses are built south and in areas that are more arid. But in the hydroponic tomato system, 100% of the nutrients go through the water. And so every week we would take a tissue sample, we'd send that to a lab. They would tell us how to change our fertigation strategy, what nutrients we needed to increase, what nutrients we needed to decrease, all the micros and macros. And so that was part of the journey of hydroponic tomatoes. And when we put our first drip system in, I'll never forget, we put it in on our own farm about 2 miles north of here. And it was a light bulb moment for me, because I was like, now I have that level of control in my field as I did in my greenhouse, where every day, if I wanted to, I could tweak those nutrients up or down. We had center pivot irrigation at the time on a number of fields, and we've continued to add center pivot irrigation on other fields. So we have both pivot and drip on our farming operation here. We're about a third irrigated and 2/3 dry land, all corn soybean rotation. We do some specialty corn for a food processing plant. So do a few different things there, but we've tried organic. Currently don't have any organic acres, but have played with that a little bit as well. No livestock on our farming operation. It's 100% row crop. So kind of rethinking that here the last couple of years as the livestock market has definitely taken front and center stage. So maybe let's go back to early 2000s. We were into landscaping. We were looking for a way to expand our landscape business. So landscaping in northeast Kansas, a lot of small communities. If you draw circle 15 miles, I think there's about 10 to 12,000 people that live here. So it's a pretty rural area, very rural area here. And so understood that we were unless we were going to drive to one of the big cities, we were never going to have a large landscape business, and we wanted to keep that business growing. So we were looking for other ways to grow our business, and we started with government contracting. The first few jobs we did involved wetland maintenance. So basically we were doing maintenance for NRCS on permanent wetlands. Ted, what do you remember about those days and some of the projects we did for wetland maintenance?
Yes, we did a lot of tree removal. I think we had a 5-year contract with the state of Nebraska to do wetlands maintenance, and so spent a lot of my winter break and Thanksgiving break in the wintertime clearing trees And then in the spring, we did a lot of prescribed burning. There was some seeding and disking and a few other smaller things that we did, but for the most part, it was tree removal and burning. Tree removal usually wasn't too big of a deal. A lot of memories of driving across the state of Nebraska in the middle of winter, getting caught in blizzards, and it taught me a lot about resilience. Trying to figure that all out. I think I was about 16 years old doing that, and then the burning part of it in the spring was it was just a high stress job, burning wetlands in an area that you've never been in. So those are all some things that have that really molded me, I guess, growing up, and then the ability to work with all the different landowners and the NRCS agents. There was a lot of times I would show up on somebody's land, and it would be a government contract. The government can control the land, but the landowner really has no say in it. And so I would show up and start chopping down trees. The landowner would show up and be, sometimes they were excited to see it happening, but there were other guys that would come out swinging and not too happy that I'm taking away their hunting ground, and it was all just part of the government contracting. So a lot of interesting memories from Nebraska.
Indeed. Ted and I are both on the local fire department, both volunteer firefighters, so the prescribed burning was something that was kind of in our blood a little bit and continues to be. And so from the NRCS contract, then we got into doing some tree planting. We did some large tree planting jobs down in Texas on some wetlands, and that led us into some large tree clearing projects, which was kind of our final. Well, how would you describe that contract?
Well, you might call it the straw that broke the camel's back, maybe. No, it was a very large growing experience or learning experience. Yeah.
We got into a tree clearing contract down in Fort Hood, Texas, and basically the terms of the contract, the local people on the ground that were enforcing the contract didn't agree or didn't follow what the contract said. We ended up having to get some lawyers involved, and it kind of got messy for a while. And it was very painful financially. It was probably the most painful financial thing we'd ever been through. It nearly broke us. Thankfully, it didn't. We came out of that and decided we were done doing government work. That was one of the things we learned from that, was that we did not want to be involved in government contracting anymore. And so at that point, then, we were looking for something to continue to grow and expand and kind of dig ourselves out of this hole. And fall of 2012, so that project happened in 2011. 2012 was a massive drought in northeast Kansas and over most of the Midwest. And so kind of back to the farming side of that, my full-time income at that point was coming from landscaping. So I was basically running the landscape company, the garden center, involved in the farm just a little bit. But most of my time was spent on the landscape side of things. So that's where I was putting most of my time and energy, as well as Ted. Then in the fall of 2012, massive drought. We had a farm just 2 miles north of here, 40 acres. It was an odd-shaped field. We had water developed for the 40 acres. There was a pivot on the east side of the creek. The pivot was a windshield wiper, but it couldn't cross this creek and hit the rest of the field effectively. So we thought, man, we've got the water here. It's a drought year. That corn burned up, probably only made 10 or 20 bushel. And it's like, if we could irrigate this, it would be a game changer. So we started doing some research, or we had done some research on different forms of irrigation. My brother Keith had the Valley dealership at the time. And so we started as a joint venture between MWI as the pivot company and Grimm's Gardens landscape business, and started doing drip projects together. So it was a joint project to start with. Grimm's Gardens was doing the install. MWI was providing pipe and materials and such. And we worked that way for the first, I think, 3 years. 3 to 4 years we did projects that way. Kind of started cutting our teeth, learning about the process, just doing a few projects a year, really kind of honing in our skills and learning how this worked. From the beginning, though, kind of back to the tomato story, agronomy we knew was always an important part of that, and so that's kind of always been one of my passions. Is irrigation is a piece of agronomy, but there's so much more to it. We have the ability to spoon feed nutrients. We can tweak what that plant's doing, and now we've got a drip line right at the roots. And I always like to draw the picture that it's like an IV for the plant, right? Like I can just spoon feed those nutrients right into the roots of those plants, and can be super effective, super efficient with them. So that's been a fun journey. It's still a journey. We don't have all the answers. There's things we learn every year, every growing season. I always wish I could have multiple growing seasons a year so I could speed up my learning process. But it's definitely been part of our journey, part of our energy, that we focus a lot of time and attention to the agronomy side of things. NutraDrip officially was born in 2012. That's when kind of the drip business started. But NutraDrip, I think, was that name we came up in about 2016, 17, I believe, was when we started that. Ted, any early memories of starting NutraDrip and kind of your involvement with it at that point in time?
Yeah, so I going back to the Texas story and Fort Hood there on that project, and one of the reasons we got out of government contracting is just because I think we realized that's not who we are. Having to follow a piece of paper and having to be a hard-nosed person and stick to a contract, that's just not who we are, right? We're personable people, and it was pretty clear by the time we got done with that project that that's not the industry we wanted to be in. So the first drip project, I don't remember where I was, but I was not around when that one got installed. My earliest memories getting started were out on Dan Lepkus's project out in Illinois. Got home from my honeymoon in Hawaii in 2014 and went out there and we installed drip all the way up until it started to snow. Learned a lot about what's possible, what's not recommended, and it's been quite a journey to get from there to where we are today. The people that you have to have with you, and the attention to detail it takes to do a drip system, learning all of that. It's we usually learn things the hardest way possible, it seems like, but we've overcome and got here. So
experience can be a great teacher, but it can be expensive sometimes. Yeah, so we've been really fortunate and blessed to work with some really good producers. We've got a couple names. I'll drop 3 names of producers we work with that have some notoriety, I guess you'd say. So Dan Lepkus out in Illinois, definitely an influential farmer. He's been multi-year national corn grower champion. Kelly Garrett in Denison, Iowa. We put a system in for Kelly. We put a number of systems in for Kelly, and been a great partner for us as well. And now just starting to work with Greg Peterson, part of the Peterson Farm Brothers. So super excited to have some influential farmers and then just your everyday Joes that get the job done. We have a lot of really, really good customers that have helped us get where we are. We wouldn't be able to do it without great customers, without repeat customers. Put a system in, 2 or 3 or 4 years later, like, okay, I'm ready for more of this. So that's always encouraging to see. So as NutraDrip has evolved, we'll maybe just talk a little bit about kind of where it's changed from there. So started out as, and our core business still is subsurface drip irrigation, installing, maintaining, designing a drip irrigation system. So Ted, maybe just talk just a little bit about what does it look like from the time a salesperson meets with a grower. What does NutraDrip all do to help make sure that project's successful from the first meeting until they're growing their first crop?
Yeah, so our crews come in. First thing we want to do is kind of assess the field soil type, and typically we'll come in and pre-rip the field, and the reason we do that is to identify if there's any rocks first and foremost, because rocks are super hard on our install equipment. And so we got inline rippers come in, inline rip the field, get rid of those rocks. It loosens the soil. The plow that we put in the tape with pulls pretty hard because it's a 2-inch wide shank that's 14 inches deep, and that pulls really hard. So pre-ripping really helps get the tape put in the ground at the absolute best way possible, and that's super important when you're thinking about a 30 to 50 year investment, is getting that tape in the ground right and having good soil to fall back on top of that tape. And then the next thing we would do is come in, plow the tape in, and then we always want to make sure we're wheel packing that tape in, and the reasons for that is the ground a lot of times will stay open and loose with that 2-inch wide shank going through it, and so you pack it in there with something like a sprayer or a tractor with a front end loader on it, and that kind of seals that soil back up over the tape to make sure that we're getting good water to soil contact when we go to turn that drip tape on, and also to keep rodents from getting down in there. When we do fall installs or even spring installs, it gets cool at night and those rodents want to go down. So if there's an open slot there, they're going to get down in there, and a little piece of plastic, they're going to start chewing on it. And then our crews come in and we subcontract the trenching out usually, and then our crews come in, do all the pipe work and connections. And we really pride ourselves in having good employees that know what they're doing. All of our crews are led by TN visa workers out of Mexico, and these guys are irrigation designers or specialists or agronomists. They're very, very well educated in irrigation and the agronomy side of it, and knowing that they're doing a good job, making sure that the design's good, and I guess to back up, we use John Maxwell to do all the original design work and final design work, and that's his only job is to do design work for irrigation systems. So that includes looking at elevations and how big the field is, how long it is, make sure we get the right size of tape, right size of emitter. And then, back to our crews. They install it. They take great pride in their work and making sure that's all getting connected right. And there's plenty of disaster stories to go around about installs going bad, and we've had our own, and we've stood behind everything that has gone wrong, and that's one of those places where we've learned the hard way a few times. But our guys do an awesome job of making sure that when they turn a system on, there's going to be as few leaks as possible, and that system's going to operate the way it should. So that's all in the field, and then we have our filter station, and that's something that we never try to take shortcuts on that. Making sure we have good filtration ahead of the drip system. So before the project starts, we try to get out there and get a sample of the well, so that way we know what kind of water we're dealing with. That can be a really big deal. Some guys have really high iron or manganese, and that's something that's got to be managed through. We've got guys that focus on managing that, and it's something that can be worked with, but it's something we need to know about ahead of time. So we always try to get a water sample so we know what's going to be in that water and what that's going to look like going out to the field. And then obviously our agronomy that I think Kurt's going to talk about here in a bit kind of plays into that as well. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So once the system's installed, then looking at what's the water quality from a nutrient availability standpoint. How do the nutrients change when we turn the water on? And then how do we spoon feed that plant optimally? So we've been big believers in tissue sampling in the past. We've now moved on to sap sampling primarily. We believe that we've kind of opened up the next level of understanding with some partners on sap sampling, and then also what we call a rapid soil test, which is a saturated paste that looks at the soil and water interaction. So it's kind of an in-depth look at how the water impacts the soil. With drip irrigation, one of the things that we learned early on was that keeping the emitters clean, super important. And so that water sample, the filtration, really, really important. But there's also minerals in the water that can cause problems, things like iron and manganese that can foul the emitter up. And so water quality has always been a part of what we've been involved in because we had to keep the emitters clean. Well, one of the things we've learned through that process is that water quality is also super important on center pivots. It's also super important on spray water. And so we've kind of gotten into the water quality realm, looking outside of drip irrigation and taking some of those same principles and applying them in other areas as well. So that's kind of another part of what we do. Ted, maybe talk a little bit about ongoing maintenance then. We have service teams, service contracts we send out. So if we put a system in, we're there to help take care of it, make sure that system is lasting 25, 30 years. How does that ongoing service maintenance stuff look like?
Yeah, so on the design that I was talking about that John Maxwell does for us, there's a flow and pressure for every zone. So the fields are typically split up into zones, so you can water, if it's an 80-acre field and you've got 5 gallons per minute per acre, which is kind of the ideal water amount. You'd have about 4 zones in that 80 acres, and you typically water 2 of those zones at a time. So that the design shows what that flow should be and what the valve pressure should be. Every system's equipped with a flow meter, so we can go out there and read in real time what that's flowing. So our crews come out in the springtime, they'll turn the system on, fly the field with a drone or drive over it with a 4-wheeler to check for leaks, all while verifying the pressure, make sure the pressure's at what it's designed to be at, and then as well as the flow. And then if there's any issues in season, they'll be happy to come out and help with that. We have probes and satellite imagery that we use in season to kind of help monitor crops and watch for leaks. The satellite imagery is pretty awesome for that. If there's something big that pops up, if you don't have a controller, a lot of guys have controllers on their system so we can see, we can watch that flow in real time throughout the season, and it builds a graph. And so it's pretty easy to say, hey, something happened here, the flow went up, and we can send guys out there to check it out. But yeah, the probes, the ear watch, those are kind of in season, and then we also offer a winterizing service. So come in, make sure the system's ready for winter, flush it out, pump everything out or blow it out, and be ready for the next season. So
very good. Yeah, so we're part of our business model, coming from the landscape business, is we kind of looked at drip similar to a landscape project or a lawn irrigation project where, okay, you put it in for the homeowner, but then there's ongoing maintenance that needs to happen with it. And that's kind of the same model we've built our drip business on, is the install super important, get that done right, and then walk alongside the landowner to make sure that project's successful over a long period of time. So making sure that investment's good. So kind of a little bit more then about where we've evolved in the last 2 to 3 years. Actually, it's been longer than that. We've been working on this, but some of the doors that have opened for us around manure and livestock systems, we'll maybe just touch on that just a little bit, kind of how we got into that. So I think 6 or 7 years ago, we had a producer, Todd Rokey here, who had put a drip system in, had hog manure, about a mile away in a lagoon, and he's like, why can't I put that hog manure through my drip system? We had heard that there was dairies in California doing that, so we thought, well, let's check into this. So we started working with Todd on what that would take to make that manure clean enough, and within a year we had a successful retrofit done on his system where we were able to start injecting that manure through his drip system. That got the attention of some dairies then that have what we call leachate, where they have feed pad runoff that comes off their silage pad, and they have to collect that in a separate lagoon. It's very low in mineral and nutrient content, but there's a lot of gallons of it. And so it's really expensive for the dairies to get rid of that. So we put some drip systems in for those dairies, then started getting into dairy manure separation. And as that has evolved, we've had to find equipment that could get manure clean enough to go through drip, which has been a challenge. There's not a lot out there that can do that on a cost-effective basis, but we found some equipment in Italy that allows us to do that. So we became a distributor for that company, now bring that equipment over and install it for drip customers and non-drip customers. So kind of the next step then was, as we learned that, hey, this worked for drip irrigation, well, now we also know that works for pivot irrigation. It's plenty clean for pivots. We also learned that it takes some of the phosphorus out of the manure. Anywhere from 30 to 70% of the phosphorus is typically stripped out when we go through the separation equipment. So now we're working with some producers, that's all they're interested in. They're not interested in drip. but they're super interested in being able to take that phosphorus out and get their manure easier to handle and allow them to put more gallons per acre, or even allow them to put manure on. I was just on the phone with a hog producer up north last night, and they're heavily restricted on what they can apply because of their phosphorus levels in their soil have gotten too high. So they're looking for a way to strip that out. So now we've kind of gotten into manure separation, and how do we help livestock producers take their manure, separate the phosphorus out. Kind of some new things we're working on then is how do we go beyond that and even take out some of the other minerals as well, beyond just the phosphorus. So always an evolving research and development going on, trying to learn what's new, what are the new technologies that we can integrate with this to make this successful. It's kind of always been part of our DNA, is to be looking for something new, and so that's what really gets me excited. I spend about 80% of my time today working on manure and kind of what's new and what's in front of us. So that's kind of where we're at today. We're a company now with 50 to 60 employees, depending on the time of year. We've got a great team. We've got everything from accounting to finance to HR, engineers, draft people that do drafting for us. Obviously marketing. We've got a lot of field service technicians, logistics people that haul stuff around. It's just kind of a great team that we've been able to put together here to make all these things happen. And be able to serve our customers. Ted, maybe just talk real quick on where we're located at. Like, where's our sales guys at? What's the primary area that we serve?
Yeah, so our primary area is the Midwest, up and down the I-29 corridor. We have our main locations here in northeast Kansas, about 4 miles from Nebraska and 20 miles from Missouri. And then we have another location in Hastings, Nebraska. And we have several employees that live out there in that area, in the Hastings Holdridge area. There's a lot of drip systems out there that were installed before our time, and we help take care of those systems today with our service team. And then we've got Travis Roque is down in the Lamar, Missouri area, and then Wyatt is up by Sioux Falls there. And he travels up north into Minnesota. We have a guy in Indiana, Brad, helps us out there, and starting to kind of push into the Michigan, Ohio, that territory with the dairies. So pretty well the whole Midwest, but I think last year we were as far west as Utah and as far east as New York. So and between Canada and Mexico.
Yeah,
a lot of miles get put on.
Miles. How many miles did we put on last year on pickups?
I think about 1.6 million miles. So
yeah, a lot of miles. So yeah, I think that kind of covers the overview of NutraDrip. I hope it's been informative for you. If you're interested in learning more, we're always an open book about what we got going on. We're excited about the future. We're excited about the work we've been able to do up to this point. We're a family-owned company. We live out our beliefs. We are thankful that we've been asked to steward resources here, and that's how we view our interaction with our customers. It's not always about the money. It's about having a good relationship and making sure that we can take care of people, and that what we do is an honor to God. So that's a little bit about our story. We appreciate you joining us today. Thanks for listening to the GroundWork with NutraDrip. If you found today's conversation helpful, make sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Thanks for joining us.